Commander Zixtal stood at the viewport of the Galactic Coalition vessel, watching Earth grow larger in view. As the representative of the Arcturian species and leader of this diplomatic mission, he couldn't help but feel a mixture of curiosity and disdain. His crystalline skin reflected the pale blue light of the approaching planet, while his four eyes blinked in sequential patterns, a sign of deep thought among his kind. "Primitive planet, primitive methods," muttered Sub-Commander Nivera, a Centaurian warrior whose bioluminescent markings pulsed with barely contained contempt. "Their military still relies on projectile weapons and physical combat. We're wasting our time." Zixtal understood the sentiment. The Coalition had sent representatives from 12 advanced species to study Earth's military training methods. The decision came after human forces had mysteriously managed to repel 3 swarm incursions, a feat no other species had accomplished in centuries of conflict. The landing was smooth, almost disappointing in its simplicity. They touched down at Fort Ironclad, Earth's premier military training facility, located in a region humans called Montana. The delegation of 36 alien representatives emerged from their ship, each wearing environmental suits calibrated to Earth's atmosphere, more out of protocol than necessity. They were greeted by a single human female in a crisp uniform, standing ramrod straight with hands clasped behind her back. Her name tag read Colonel Richards, and her face bore the weathered look of a veteran warrior. "Welcome to Earth," she said, her voice carrying across the landing pad with unexpected authority. "You're here to learn how we train our soldiers. We're here to show you why human military preparation is the most effective in the known galaxy." Several members of the delegation exchanged knowing looks. The Meridian representative, a being of pure energy contained within a humanoid shell, actually laughed, a sound like tinkling crystals. "With all due respect, Colonel," Nivera stepped forward, her bioluminescence now pulsing with amusement, "your species still relies on muscle power and primitive projectile weapons. Our civilizations have evolved beyond such basic methods." Colonel Richards smiled. It wasn't a friendly smile. "That's why you're here for 6 months, not 6 hours," she replied. Master Sergeant Torres, a human male, appeared seemingly from nowhere, moving with surprising silence for his size. His presence commanded immediate attention, and even Zixtal found himself straightening instinctively. "These are your new recruits, Master Sergeant. They need to understand how we make Earth's finest." Torres surveyed the group with eyes that seemed to see through their environmental suits, enhanced bodies, and advanced tech. His voice, when it came, was like grinding stones. "Welcome to hell, ladies and gentlemen. Remove those environmental suits. You've already been cleared for Earth's atmosphere. From this moment on, you are not diplomats, scientists, or warriors of your respective worlds. You are recruits, and you are mine." What followed was a blur of activity. Their environmental suits were collected, their advanced communication devices confiscated, and their personal weapons logged and stored. Each delegate was issued standard human military gear, crude by their standards but surprisingly well designed. Within hours, they found themselves in barracks that seemed deliberately Spartan. No automation, no AI assistance, not even basic comfort modulators. Just metal beds, lockers, and the sound of Torres's voice explaining the first rule of human military training. "Your technology doesn't make you strong," he barked. "It makes you dependent. We're going to strip away everything you think makes you superior. Then we're going to rebuild you from the ground up." That night, as the alien delegation tried to adjust to their new reality, Zixtal lay on his uncomfortable bed, listening to the complaints and murmurs of his fellow trainees. He caught fragments of conversations, the Meridian struggling with the concept of physical exercise, the Centaurians scoffing at the primitive weapons, the Quantum Collective representatives trying to calculate how long they could endure this primitive torture. Just before lights out, Torres's voice came over the intercom. 400 hours, physical training begins. Welcome to day 1, recruits. Sleep tight." Zixtal's 4 eyes blinked in sequence again, but this time it wasn't contemplation. It was worry. Something in Torres's tone, in the way Colonel Richards had smiled, told him they had severely underestimated what lay ahead. As he drifted into an uneasy sleep, he couldn't shake the feeling that they were about to learn why humans had survived everything the galaxy had thrown at them. They weren't just going to observe human military training. They were going to live it. The first crack of thunder woke Zixtel from his fitful sleep, but it wasn't thunder at all. It was Torres slamming a metal rod against a trash can, sending echoes through the barracks that had even the quantum collective vibrating in discomfort. Up and at 'em, recruits. Welcome to your first day of actual training. The chaos that followed would have been comical if it weren't so desperately earnest. 36 beings of various shapes, sizes, and anatomical configurations struggled to don their Earth military-issued gear. The Meridian Energy being, Lieutenant Val, kept accidentally phasing through their clothes until Torres showed them how to maintain solid form while dressing. Outside, the Montana air bit cold and sharp. Earth's single sun hadn't yet risen, and the stars above looked unfamiliar to most of the recruits. Torres stood before them, somehow more intimidating in the pre-dawn darkness. 3-mile run to start, he announced. Standard human pace. No levitation, no enhanced speed, no quantum tunneling. He looked pointedly at several recruits who had already begun adjusting their biological systems for advantage. The run was brutal. Not because of the distance. Most of their species could cover far greater distances through technological means, but because of the methodology. Torres demanded they stay together as a unit, matching pace with the slowest among them. The Centaurians, natural sprinters, chafed at the restraint. The crystalline Arcturians, including Zixtel, struggled with the constant impact on their joints. This is barbaric, wheezed Nivara, her bioluminescence dimmed to almost nothing. We have transport systems that can cross galaxies, yet we run like primitives. Torres appeared beside her, matching her pace effortlessly. Tell me, Sub-Commander, what happens when those transport systems fail? When your tech breaks down? When you're stranded on a hostile world with nothing but your own body to rely on? The question hung in the air, unanswered, punctuated only by the sound of feet hitting dirt and labored breathing from a dozen different species. The run was just the beginning. They moved through a series of exercises that targeted muscle groups many of the aliens didn't even know they possessed. Push-ups, pull-ups, squats. Basic movements that somehow managed to humble beings who could manipulate quantum fields with their minds. By midday, the first casualty occurred. A Proximan delegate, their body adapted for the low gravity of their home world, collapsed during the 10th set of burpees. Their crystalline exoskeleton had cracked under the strain. Medical tent, Torres ordered, but his voice carried no sympathy. Anyone else feeling like they can't handle basic human training? 3 more delegates stepped forward, including one of the energy beings who admitted they couldn't maintain solid form under such sustained physical stress. Torres dismissed them with a nod, then turned to the remaining recruits. Let me be clear, he said, pacing before them. This isn't about making you human. This is about teaching you something your advanced civilizations have forgotten. The fundamental connection between mind, body, and will. You think humans are primitive because we still train our bodies. Look around you. 4 of your finest couldn't last 6 hours. Zixtel felt his crystalline skin vibrating with exhaustion, but something in Torres's words resonated with him. He noticed others too. Nivara's bioluminescence had taken on a thoughtful pulse, and even the quantum collective representatives had stopped their probability calculations and were simply listening. The afternoon brought weapons training. They were each issued an M4 rifle, what most of them considered an antique. Yet as Torres broke down the mechanics, the maintenance, the fundamental principles of ballistic warfare, Zixtel began to see something they'd all missed. Your energy weapons, your plasma rifles, your quantum disruptors, they're all impressive, Torres acknowledged as he demonstrated proper firing stance. But they all require power sources, complex maintenance, perfect conditions. This, he held up the rifle. This will fire in any atmosphere, underwater, in space, after being buried in mud for a week. And if it jams, you can fix it with basic tools and understanding. The day ended with more casualties. 2 quantum collective representatives discovered their probability manipulation couldn't compensate for physical exhaustion. A Centaurian warrior admitted defeat when she couldn't maintain her enhanced strength after hours of constant exertion. As they dragged themselves back to the barracks, Zixtal noticed something had changed. The complaints were quieter, more thoughtful. The dismissive attitudes had been replaced by a grudging respect, or at least consideration. In their Spartan quarters, Nivera approached Zixtal, her bioluminescence now a deep, contemplative blue. Perhaps, she said quietly, we were too quick to judge. Their methods seem primitive, but they work. Zixtal finished. They work when everything else fails. Taurus's voice came over the intercom, just as it had the night before. Day 1 complete. 7 of your fellow recruits have dropped out. Tomorrow, we start the real training. Sleep well. Zixtal lay on his bunk, every crystalline facet of his body aching, and realized why humans had survived the swarm attacks. It wasn't about technology or tactics. It was about this, the ability to push beyond comfort, to function without enhancement, to keep moving when every fiber of your being wanted to stop. As sleep claimed him, he wondered how many of them would remain by the end of week 1. More importantly, he wondered if those who survived would ever be the same. Day 15 brought the survival exercise. The remaining 24 recruits were transported via helicopter to a remote wilderness location in what humans called the Rocky Mountains. The thinning oxygen at high altitude immediately affected several species, forcing them to adapt without their usual technological assistance. 3 days, Torres announced as the helicopter lifted away. Your mission is to reach the extraction point 50 miles north. No tech, no enhanced abilities, just your training, your teamwork, and basic survival gear. Zixtal surveyed their supplies, basic rations, water purification tablets, compass, maps, and primitive first aid kits. His crystalline form caught the morning sunlight, sending rainbow refractions across the snow-dusted ground. This is suicide, muttered one of the quantum collective, their normally shimmering form dulled by exhaustion. These temperatures, this terrain, it's not compatible with multiple species here. That's the point, Nivera responded, her bioluminescence steady and determined. 2 weeks of training had changed her, changed them all. Humans thrive on being uncomfortable, on adapting. They split into teams of 4, mixing species for maximum efficiency. Zixtal found himself partnered with Nivara, a quantum collective named Pulse, and a meridian energy being called Spark. They began their trek north, using the basic navigation skills Torres had drilled into them. The first challenge came at nightfall. Temperature dropped dramatically, and without their environmental suits, they had to rely on primitive fire-making techniques. Spark, surprisingly, proved most adept at this, using their energy form to understand the precise friction needed. On my world, Spark explained, their form flickering like the flames they'd created, we never considered physical fire. Energy manipulation was everything. But this is beautiful in its simplicity. The second day brought the attack. Human soldiers playing the role of hostiles ambushed their position, using simple smoke grenades and rubber bullets. In the past, each species would have relied on their unique abilities: quantum tunneling, energy projection, crystalline defense matrices. Instead, they found themselves applying human tactical doctrine: cover, concealment, coordinated movement. Contact left. Nivara called out, using human military terminology that now felt natural. Her bioluminescence, once a liability, proved useful for silent signaling in the darkness. They repelled the attack using nothing but teamwork and training. No advanced tech, no superior alien abilities, just what Torres had taught them. The third day tested them most severely. Food ran low, fatigue set in, and the extraction point seemed impossibly distant. 2 more recruits dropped out, their bodies or minds unable to continue. But something had changed in those who remained. "I understand now," Pulse said during a brief rest, their quantum form stabilizing into something more solid than ever before. "Humans don't just train soldiers. They forge them. Every step, every challenge, strips away what we think we need and shows us what we're actually capable of." The revelation came to Zixtal as they finally spotted the extraction point. A simple human military transport waited on a makeshift landing zone. Torres standing beside it with his characteristic stoic expression. They had covered 50 miles of hostile terrain, survived attacks, endured environmental extremes, and done it all without the advantages their species took for granted. "Welcome back, recruits," Torres said as the surviving teams assembled. His voice carried something new: respect. "You've just completed the same survival course we put our special forces through. Without your tech, without your enhanced abilities, you've proven you can operate at the level of Earth's elite soldiers." Zixtal looked at his fellow survivors. 18 remained from the original 36. Their appearances had changed. Quantum forms more focused, energy beings more solid, even his own crystalline structure had developed new facets and strengths. "The swarm attacked us first," Torres continued, his voice carrying across the mountain air. "We didn't have advanced tech to fall back on. We didn't have superior abilities to rely on. We had this, the knowledge that when everything else fails, when every advantage is stripped away, the will to survive and protect remains." As they boarded the transport, Zixtal caught Nivera's eye. Her bioluminescence pulsed with understanding, matching his own crystalline resonance. They had come to study human military training, expecting to find primitive methods to improve upon. Instead, they had discovered something far more valuable: the foundation of human resilience itself. The transport lifted off, carrying them back to base where more challenges awaited. But now, as his aching crystalline form settled into the seat, Zixtal knew they would face them differently. They had learned to be more than their technology, more than their natural abilities. They had learned to be soldiers, in the most human sense of the word. The shooting range echoed with the sound of conventional firearms, a stark contrast to the energy weapons and quantum disruptors the alien recruits were accustomed to. Week 4 of training had brought them to advanced combat trials, and the remaining 18 delegates were about to understand why human warfare had proven so effective against the swarm. "Today, we simulate urban combat," Torres announced, walking past their formation. "You'll be using live ammunition. The targets will be moving. The conditions will be unpredictable." The combat town before them looked deceptively simple: concrete buildings, narrow streets, broken windows. But as they moved through their first exercise, the complexity of human tactical thinking became apparent. Multiple contacts, Zixtal called out as automated targets sprang up around them. His crystalline form had adapted to the weight of human body armor, moving with surprising agility through the debris-strewn street. Nivera took point, her bioluminescence now controlled to maintain stealth. The quantum collective members had learned to stabilize their forms for precise shooting, while the meridian energy beings had mastered the art of physical combat without phasing through their opponents. "Room clear," Spark announced, their energy form now capable of maintaining solid state even during intense combat maneuvers. Moving to second floor, the exercise intensified as simulated enemy fire rained down. In the past, each species would have relied on their advanced defensive systems. Now they used what Torres had taught them: cover, movement, suppressing fire, and teamwork. "You're being flanked." Torres's voice cut through their comms. "React." The team responded instantly, applying human small unit tactics. Zixtal laid down suppressing fire, while Nivera and Pulse moved to counter the threat. Their movements were synchronized, efficient, deadly, just like the humans had taught them. "This shouldn't work," Pulse said during a brief lull, reloading their rifle with practiced ease. "Our civilizations abandoned these methods centuries ago." But But it does work, Nivera finished, her bioluminescence pulsing with battle rhythm. Because it doesn't rely on technology that can fail. It relies on instinct, training, and coordination. The day progressed through increasingly complex scenarios. Urban combat gave way to close-quarters battle, then to night operations. Each phase revealed new aspects of human military thinking: redundancy in planning, adaptation to failure, the seamless integration of different combat roles. During the final exercise, Torres threw them a curved ball. All their weapons suddenly failed to fire. In the past, this would have meant certain defeat for most alien military units. Instead, the team smoothly transitioned to hand-to-hand combat techniques, using their environment and physical training to overcome the challenge. That, Torres said as they gathered for debrief, is why human methods work. When your plasma rifles fail, when your quantum fields collapse, when your energy projection systems go offline, what do you have left? We make sure our soldiers always have an answer to that question. Zixtal looked at his hands, crystalline appendages that had grown stronger, more defined through weeks of training. He had arrived thinking humans were primitives for their reliance on physical combat. Now he understood. They weren't primitive. They were pragmatic. Tomorrow, Torres continued, we begin the final phase of your training. Some of you won't make it, but those who do will understand why humanity survived the swarm when other civilizations fell. As they cleaned their weapons, another primitive task that had taken on new meaning. Zixtal caught fragments of conversation among his fellow trainees. They no longer spoke of human methods with disdain. Instead, they discussed ways to integrate these teachings into their own military doctrines. It's not about abandoning our advanced technology, Spark observed, their energy form solidifying into a near-perfect human shape. It's about having capabilities that exist independent of it. The sun set over Fort Ironclad, casting long shadows across the combat town. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but they would face them differently now. They had learned to be more than their technology, more than their evolved abilities. They had learned to be warriors in the human tradition, adaptable, resilient, and never reliant on a single advantage or system. As Zixtal performed his final equipment check, he realized that this might be humanity's greatest military innovation: the ability to function effectively at any level of technological sophistication. The galaxy had underestimated humanity, dismissing their methods as primitive. Now, watching his fellow trainees move with newfound confidence and capability, Zixtal understood the truth. Humans weren't stuck in the past. They had simply never forgotten the fundamentals that made survival possible. The final test came at dawn. After 6 months of training, only 15 delegates remained from the original 36. They stood at attention as Colonel Richards addressed them, her presence now commanding a respect none of them had felt on arrival. You came here to study human military training, she began. Instead, you became part of it. Today's challenge will prove whether you truly understand what that means. The challenge was deceptively simple: defend a strategic position against waves of attackers. The twist: they would face both high-tech alien forces and low-tech human opponents, with their own capabilities randomly limited throughout the exercise. Zixtal took command of the defense, his crystalline form now bearing scars and strengthened facets from months of training. Nivera, take the high ground. Pulse, Spark, establish crossfire positions. Everyone else, fortify the perimeter, human style. The first wave came with advanced technology: plasma weapons, shield generators, quantum disruption fields. 6 months ago, they would have considered this an overwhelming force. Now, they saw the weaknesses. EMP burst detected. Someone shouted as their tech began failing. But instead of panic, there was only adaptation. They switched to ballistic weapons, used terrain for cover, maintained unit cohesion. The second wave brought human forces with basic weapons and tactics. Again, they adapted, using their physical training and battlefield awareness to maintain their position. The final wave combined both threats. Through the chaos of battle, Zixtal watched his fellow graduates apply everything they'd learned. Quantum beings maintained solid form while conducting close combat. Energy beings coordinated fire teams without relying on advanced communications. Every species moved with the disciplined precision Torres had drilled into them. When it ended, they stood victorious, battered, exhausted, but undefeated. "This," Torres said, walking among them, "is what humanity offers the galaxy. Not just technology, not just tactics, but the fundamental understanding that true military strength comes from the warrior, not their weapons." Colonel Richards presented each graduate with 2 items: a standard human combat knife and a certificate of completion. "The knife," she explained, "represents what you've learned here. It's simple, reliable, and lethal in trained hands. It works without power, without technology, without enhancement, like you now do." Zixtal accepted his knife, feeling its weight, so insignificant compared to the weight of understanding he now carried. "The swarm adapts to technology," Colonel Richards continued. "It cannot adapt to the human spirit, to the will to survive, to the bond between warriors who trust each other with their lives. This is what you take back to your worlds." That evening, at a ceremony marking their graduation, each delegate spoke about their transformation. "I came here believing humans were primitive," Nivera admitted, her bioluminescence steady and proud. "I leave understanding that they are immortal, not as individuals, but as a fighting force that can never be truly defeated because they never forget the basics of survival." Spark, their energy form now permanently altered by the training, added, "We evolved past physical combat, past mechanical weapons, past the need to test our bodies against reality. In doing so, we became vulnerable to any force that could disrupt our technology. Humans showed us how to be strong at every level of warfare." As they prepared to return to their worlds, Zixtal addressed his fellow graduates one last time. "We came to learn human military secrets. Instead, we learned that their greatest secret is no secret at all. It is the understanding that true strength comes from within, that technology should enhance our capabilities, not replace them, and that the will to fight is more powerful than any weapon." Torres watched them board their ships, his expression as stern as ever, but with a hint of pride. "Remember," he called out, "somewhere in the galaxy, right now, a human soldier is training, running, fighting, surviving. That's why we win. That's why we'll keep winning." As their ships lifted off, carrying new knowledge and transformed warriors back to their worlds, Zixtal looked down at Earth through his viewport. He understood now why the swarm had failed here. Humanity hadn't just developed better weapons or tactics. They had maintained their connection to the fundamental truths of warfare while advancing their technology. They were not primitives clinging to outdated methods. They were warriors who had never forgotten what makes a true soldier: the perfect balance of mind, body, and will, ready to fight at any level of technology, in any environment, against any enemy. The galaxy had mocked human training. Now, they would emulate it.